the black Americans have been the only real diehard Americans here, because we're the only ones who carried the process through the process. That everyone else has to sort of like skip stages. We're the ones who marched, we're the ones who carried the Bible, we're the ones who carried the flag, we're the ones who tried to go through the courts. And being born American didn't seem to matter. Because we were born Americans, but we still had to fight for what we were looking for. And we still had to go through those channels and those processes.
I don't really care what you have to say. Facts over fiction is the motto relay. Muhammad Ali came up from the clay. Grassroots built up this USA. Now knowing your history, you'll get played. Equip yourself cause we came to slay any opponent that's up in our way. Look at Malcolm X and his delivery.
All right, test 1 2, test 1 2. All right, hope everyone is doing well. I'm just going to check my audio here. Thanks everyone for joining. It's been a busy day, but always a good day. Glad to be alive, breathing, and making it happen. All right, appreciate your patience. We will be getting down to the nitty-gritty shortly.
Why 30-year-olds love True Classic. Number 1. True Classic tees are designed for regular guys. Most brands make t-shirts for models, which is great for models, but unrealistic for everyone else. They are tight around your arms and shoulders, which makes you look built.
All right, let's see. Test 1 2, test 1 2. All right, let's see. Test 1 2, test 1 2. All right. Thanks everyone for everybody's patience. We are in the building. This is Eman at the Mass Media Group. Color of Wealth report in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Read series and review. This is part 6. Part 6, quick housekeeping, and then we're going to get right into the business, handling the business. Reparations Now, part 2, coming out 2026. Mr. Uncomfortable, if you have a chance, you can go to the YouTube page or MrUncomfortable.com. Pre-order the book at Kindle, should be in the description. All right, and tomorrow, July 1st, we have SB 437, SB 518. Judiciary hearing here in California that is authored by Weber Pearson. All right, that's going to be held in Sacramento at the state capitol at 8:30 in the morning. It's going to be early for those on the West Coast, and then those on other parts of the country might be a little later for you, depending on where you're at. But anyway, that is tomorrow. Also, please support us at etnmediagroupstore.com. That's etnmediagroupstore.com. Get your latest merch. And at Amazon, the affiliate link is in the subscription. Or not the subscription. The details or the description, not subscription. Description of this video. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then we will continue where we left off last time. All right, robustness checks. robustness checks. Just pump the screen up just a tad bit, make sure that everybody can see it. All right. Robustness checks. The baseline wealth decomposition results shown in Table 10 say that 90% of the gap is unexplained, a very large percentage of the gap. It is possible that these results suffer from omitted variable bias. We conduct multiple robustness checks in which we include additional covariates separately to the baseline model to test our results sensitivity. In particular, we are interested in knowing if differences in key wealth building drivers such as household income, home ownership, inheritance, and incarceration exposure can serve to better explain the black-white wealth gap. Table 11 shows the results of our robustness checks for compactness purposes. We report only group means, the difference or gap, and explained and unexplained portions of the gap. All of the models control for the same covariates as in Table 10. Column 1 shows our baseline results. Columns 2 through 5 add each covariate separately to the baseline model, and column 1 through column 2 adds household income. Column 3 adds home ownership rates. Column 4 adds a dummy for receiving a substantial inheritance or gifts from family or friends. And column 5 adds a dummy if the household has had incarceration exposure. Lastly, column 6 adds household income, home ownership, inheritance, and incarceration exposure jointly to the baseline model. As part of the robustness checks, we are unable to include entrepreneurship rates due to the low number of entrepreneurs in the black subsample that does not allow us to conduct the decomposition. So I guess the question is, could they not find enough entrepreneurs or for the study, or are there just not enough black entrepreneurs there? I don't know. All right. So as you can see the chart, group 1, group 2, difference, explained, unexplained. All right, let's continue. Our findings provide some useful and interesting insights. We find that the addition of wealth building covariates individually and jointly to our baseline model does not change our results. Generally speaking, the explained portion remains mostly insignificant. One exemption is when we add home ownership in column 3, for which the explained portion is now statistically significant at the 95% level. However, the gap 21,327, I believe that comma is supposed to be between the 1 and the 3, and the unexplained portion, 70.8%, remain very large. There are two major takeaways from these robustness checks. The first one is that differences in wealth among black and white households cannot be explained by observable characteristics alone. Our results show increasing support for the argument that unexplained factors such as discrimination, prejudice, or racial bias, systemic or not, play an important role in driving the black-white wealth gap in Tulsa. The second takeaway is that we cannot disentangle the racial wealth gap from the multifaceted gaps in wealth and its drivers. In short, once compared by dividing into subgroups of white and black households, covariates that have a strong racial correlation will not add much to explaining the gap. White Hispanic households, or white-Hispanic wealth and income gap decompositions. Table 12 shows the wealth, household income, and earnings gap decomposition comparing whites and Hispanics in Tulsa. The findings show statistically significant wealth and household income gaps between white and Hispanics of 158,586 and 25,401 respectively. However, we find no significant differences in earnings. That's interesting. The explained component of the wealth gap accounts for 50% of the gap and only 29% of the household income gap. On the other hand, the unexplained component seems to play a role in the household income gap, accounting for 71%, but not in the wealth gap. This finding supports the inference that in Tulsa, blacks face more unobserved discrimination that has had a long-term impact on the accumulation of wealth than Hispanics when analyzing the across group wealth and income gaps. All right, let's repeat that again. The finding supports the inference that in Tulsa, blacks face more unobserved discrimination that has a long-term impact on the accumulation of wealth than Hispanics when analyzing the across group wealth and income gaps. All right, table 12, white Hispanics, the composition of the wealth, household earnings, and earning gaps. Here's the chart. White Native American wealth and income decomposition. Table 13 shows the wealth, household income, and earnings gap decomposition comparing whites and Native Americans in Tulsa. The findings show no statistically significant gaps for wealth, household income, or earnings between whites and Native Americans. A potential explanation for this interesting result is that Native Americans obtain payments generated from oil, land, and gaming casinos, which are then shared among the community and different members of the tribes. Let's go over that again. A potential explanation for this interesting result in that Native Americans obtain payments generated from oil, land, and gaming casinos, which are then shared among the community and different members of the tribes. Now, interjection. Now, it's interesting to see if actually Tulsa wasn't bombed and massacred to see what the wealth generation would have been like today. We take a deeper look by conducting the wealth and income decompositions broken down by tribe. We first look at the Cherokee tribe, one of the major tribes around Tulsa. The results are tabulated in Table 14. Consistent with the results in Table 13, we find no statistically significant gaps for wealth, household income, or earnings between whites and Cherokees. Similarly, we conduct the wealth and income decomposition comparing whites and Muskogee. The results are tabulated in Table 15. Interestingly, in the case of the comparison between whites and Muskogee, we find statistically significant gaps for wealth and household income. For the three decompositions, we find no significance for the explained portion. However, we find evidence for the unexplained components for the wealth and household income gaps, accounting for 110% and 87% of the tribal groups we analyzed. The Muskogee were the only tribe with statistical evidence of discrimination. A deeper analysis of why we observe wealth and income gaps only for the Muskogee tribe relative to whites is left to future research. Our results show no evidence of wealth, household income, and earnings gap for household members of other tribes or with a mixed composition or tribal or no tribal affiliation. See Table 16 and see Table 17. All right, this is Table 16 and 17. Implications and conclusion. This study concludes the Color of Wealth Report series, which documents wealth and income disparities in 6 American cities: Tulsa, Washington, D.C., Boston, Los Angeles, Baltimore, and Miami. We utilize data from the National Asset Scorecard for communities of color to report differences in the asset and liability holdings, labor force outcomes, and other financial activities between various racial ethnic groups. While it is beyond the scope of this report series to identify the causal mechanisms driving disparities between groups, the reports provide strong descriptive evidence of key drivers of these disparities that, when combined with results from the literature, paint a strong narrative of why we observe wealth and income differences between groups. In this report, we find significant racial ethnic differences in income and wealth in Tulsa. Specifically, we find that blacks, Hispanics, and Muskogee have less wealth relative to whites, with blacks having the least wealth. We also find lower levels of household income for these same groups and lower earnings for blacks and Hispanics when compared to whites. When comparing estimates of the black-white wealth gap across the 5 NASCC cities, we find that Tulsa has the largest black-white wealth gap. In our sample, this is driven by large gaps between blacks and whites in home ownership and entrepreneurship rates in Tulsa, which lead to lower asset levels for blacks. Furthermore, we find that a greater portion of the wealth gap between whites and blacks is unexplained than for any other racial ethnic group when controlling for demographic and productivity characteristics. Even when adding controls for drivers of wealth, the unexplained portion of the wealth gap remains exceptionally high, providing support for factors that we are not able to control, for such as racial bias and discrimination. These results are consistent with conditions where blacks in Tulsa have faced exceptionally high levels of historical discrimination, intentional destruction of assets in black communities. I'm going to repeat that again. Intentional destruction of assets in black communities. Assets build wealth. Yes. All right. Which cannot be disentangled from race and cannot be accounted for in observable characteristics. These results align with Albright et al. 2021, who find that the Tulsa massacre caused a decrease in home ownership and occupational status for blacks that grew cumulatively over the course of the 20th century. Our results seem to pick up the effect of this massacre, where we also find large gaps in home ownership and business ownership, entrepreneurship between blacks and whites. While our estimates of the black-white wealth gap align well with the economics and history literature, more research is needed to fully understand our findings for Muskogee and Hispanic populations. For Hispanics, we find a significant wealth gap, but half of the gap is explained by differences in demographics and productivity characteristics, while for the Muskogee, nearly the full gap is unexplained, which suggests they also face high levels of discrimination. However, a large sample of the Muskogee is needed to paint a full picture. This analysis highlights the importance of collecting asset, debt, and income information for disaggregated racial ethnic groups in order to understand the complex landscape of wealth inequality in the United States. I'm going to repeat that again. This analysis highlights the importance of collecting asset, debt, and income information for, what's this word? Disaggregated. Separation information, separate information, granular, of racial ethnic groups in order to understand the complex landscape of wealth inequality in the United States. Out here in California, I believe under it's SB 189, there's currently a state disaggregated law that was passed, that bill was passed a year or two ago, I can't exactly remember, where information, I believe on this for state employees had to be disaggregated, or they could choose to mark their or racial ethnic group. So, information can be further extrapolated, right? Now, it's SB 515, I believe. I think Laura Richardson, the senator down there in Southern California, is currently introduced, and I think it passed already the Senate. Now it's going to the Assembly. SB 515 is going to be on the local level, requiring that local municipalities start collecting disaggregated information. So out here in California, we're trying to disaggregate this data. Highly suggest that other states follow suit as well. All right, let's continue. Data collected with this level of detail allows for a more precise estimation of the consequences of systemic discrimination, both historical and contemporary, on the liability of historically disadvantaged groups to accumulate wealth. Furthermore, these results have implications for the study of how wealth shocks are distributed across racial ethnic groups, and more specifically, how the benefits of wealth shocks can be mitigated or eliminated for groups that are systemically discriminated against in various arenas. For those who descend from U.S. chattel enslavement, slavery here in the United States, that is called reparatory justice, aka reparations. Let's continue. The turn of the 20th century saw an oil boom that led to a positive wealth shock for all Tulsans, but racial discrimination, including an intentional massacre and destruction of black wealth, eradicated the gains for blacks. These patterns persist to the current day, and as a result, we must consider how systemic racial ethnic discrimination reduces the potential benefit of wealth shocks induced by the private or public sector today. One of the latest prominent examples of this is the Paycheck Program, PPP loans given to small business owners to offset some of the negative impacts of the pandemic on business activity. These PP loans essentially functioned as an offsetting positive wealth shocks to small business owners. Since these loans carry a low interest rate of 1% and the loans were considered to be forgivable by the government, which meant business owners did not have to pay them back as long as they showed the funds were used to cover labor and qualified operating costs. However, research shows that black business owners received 30 to 40% lower loan amounts even after. I just got to take a sip of water on that one. However, research shows that black business owners received 30 to 40% lower loan amounts even after controlling for business and lender characteristics. The sample highlights how systemic discrimination in the financial industry prevented black business owners from accessing the needed help during the pandemic, which likely amplified the contemporaneous racial wealth gap. Therefore, this report helps accentuate the need to fully account for the historical mechanisms of systemic discrimination when studying policies targeting the closing of racial, ethnic, wealth, and income gaps, aka, ladies and gentlemen, reparations. All right, so here are some of the references. We're just going to quickly go through, as you can see on here. Here's the appendix, the summary of Color of Wealth Report series in Los Angeles. I'm not even going to read this because we're focusing on Tulsa. Baltimore. Let's see, Washington, D.C., Miami, Boston. You know what? We might, that's the end of the report. We might actually, if we have time, read the other reports. Did we already read the LA Color Wealth Report? I can't remember. I need to go back in our archive to see if we actually read that one. Because we might just do that. But anyway, everyone, I think it's apparent that reparations is owed and due, and the past harms actually still haunt particular Black Americans today. So once again, tomorrow we will, or plan on, streaming SB 437 and SB 518. Right here on Emin the Mass Media Group, your number one source for news and reparations in the universe. All right. Everybody take care of yourselves. This is the end of this Oil and Blood, the Color of Wealth in Tulsa, Oklahoma report. Hopefully we all learned something today, regardless if you're Black or white. We appreciate you in this fight for justice to repair the original sin of America. All right, aka slavery in the United States. On that note, everybody have a wonderful evening, and you take care of yourself, you and yours, and we will see you next time, hopefully tomorrow, and then the following days. All right, we are out. Be safe and take care. Peace and reparations.
The way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but free people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay? You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations, allows for the construction of these policies and practices and systems and structures that continue to oppress us. This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR roof, don't tune in.